Hello, my name is Michelle, and welcome back to another episode of the Language Lounge. And today I have Greta Lundgaard with me, and I'm really excited because we're going to talk about some things that Wayside has been doing this leadership series where it's called Leading the Way to Proficiency. And we've been every month trying to connect topics of leadership with the world languages profession and how that matters and high leverage teaching practices and how we can expand our leadership in our community. And so this month we talked about strength-based leadership. Mm-hmm. And we are recording this before the training that, or the PD that Greta is going to do with me, but it's going to air afterwards. So this is kind of going to be a summary of what we talked about. And honestly, when we started at Wayside, when we were putting together, our professional learning team was putting together this idea, there was only one person, honestly, Greta, that I wanted to talk about. Like, everybody's like, oh, who could we bring in as a guest? And I'm like, Greta. Greta is who I want to talk about, about this because, Greta, you have been such an influence to me personally and to many others as far as leadership and developing leadership specifically for us in our profession, which I think is really important. And so really doing that and not just modeling leadership, but directly talking about it. Like, what is leadership? What are strengths? What is, kind of those things, and articulating some of these things that are important to us. So I am so grateful and thankful that you are here to talk today. So why don't you just give a quick introduction? You've been on the show before, but why don't you just tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself and how this is kind of a passion, or how this is something that is important to you.
Well, thank you so much. And again, I appreciate the invitation. I mean, I enjoy just talking like we all do. And just, if we could only solve every problem, we could, exactly. If they would just let us.
Give us time and a cup of coffee.
That is so right. Well, where the whole idea of leadership came from, and I was a German teacher, a biology teacher, and an English language arts teacher before I became a district coordinator in Texas for two fairly large suburban districts. And so, again, not to put a fine point on things, but oftentimes the world language person, the administrator, the coordinator doesn't quite get the opportunity to participate in leadership activities that other curriculum people or district personnel get to do, right? We just, and that's changed over time, but particularly when I started out, it was an issue. So where I want to start with this idea of why is leadership a big deal to me, and also why is sharing ideas and mentoring has a lot of definitions, but more than just mentoring, but being able to actually talk honestly and straightforwardly about things that we need to do to help our folks in the field, kind of began for me when I became a world language coordinator in a district where basically it was like, okay, we just want her to stop talking in our ears. So we're going to give her this token little thing, and it was half time. So I taught half a day and then coordinated half a day. And they hired my principal, I will say, was the first person who really recognized that I could do this job. And so he kind of worked outside the constraints that our district boss gave us, and basically hired my replacement, who was an uncertified alt-cert person. So I taught halftime for a year while he got up to speed. And then my principal was like, oh, my Lord, look at this. I got a full-time German teacher. I don't really need Greta to teach German anymore, type of a thing. And then it was like, okay, well, whatever, but I can't house her. There's no room for her in the admin building, whatever. And so, of course, my principal's like, sure, I can give her an office. Sure, I can do that. So, he really maneuvered upper admin for me as, to get to where I did have that full-time position. But other than that, other than just support at my campus level, I didn't have a lot, but I was so fortunate to be in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because we have a group called the Metroplex Foreign Language Coordinators. And, Metroplex is what we call the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and all the little suburbs around, and large suburbs. Is, not like Atlanta, but I would say we're more similar to Atlanta area in terms of how our schools are arranged than other places. So joining this group of leaders from across the Dallas-Fort Worth area and the outer suburbs really was my introduction to what am I even supposed to do with this job, right? How is this different from being a teacher? I was never even a department chair because, the German teacher is not often the department chair, right? And so
Right.
I didn't really have anything other than being a leader in my classroom, and a leader amongst the German teacher cohort in my district. There were 4 or 5 of us. I think one of us did double duty at another campus, but I think at one time there were 5 of us full-time German teachers. And so we kind of worked together as a professional learning team across campuses. So this Metroplex Foreign Language Coordinators group, when I entered, was just so chock full of strong personalities. And I just remember the first time I attended and they started talking about, what their goals were for this year and where they are and what's next. And I'm just like taking notes like mad because I thought, wow, the possibilities where I'm just hanging on here with like trying to get everybody on the same page. It's just, and what is the same page even? So again, the Metroplex Foreign Language Coordinators, and I have to call out, Dr. M.K. McChristian, who was at Richardson ISD in Dallas at the time. She really ended up being the one that was on the same wavelength as me in terms of talking about stuff, just working up things all the way through to the end. And in fact, we were known for whenever they start talking, it gets scary. So you just have to not pay any attention to what they're saying, right? So then at that point, I moved districts and joined another district with a little bit different philosophy, with a wonderful assistant superintendent for curriculum and instruction, Dr. Jim Wusso, who was an early adopter of understanding by design. And that was the whole curriculum. And this was back in 2004, 2005. So the whole district curriculum was based on backwards design directly from Wiggins and McTighe, except for the world language curriculum. So that's where I kind of came in. And I can't say enough about his support, his leadership, because anyone who's worked through a big curriculum leadership change can know how upsetting that can be for everyone. And in this new district, success had always been high, but the criteria for success had changed. And so that was my charge from Dr. Wusso. And I'll never forget him telling me, I know our world language programs are good. I know they are successful, but I am not convinced that they're good for everyone and that everyone has an equal opportunity to be successful, meaning our students. And I that changed my life, that charge that he gave me, because that made me start thinking about, well, what is success for every student look like? What does a curriculum in which every student has the ability to be successful look like? So that kind of changed everything. And Plano believed in spending money in developing its leadership. Okay. So I just took everything I could grab and talked to Grant Wiggins face to face, saw Marzano, went to Rick Stiggins and the Assessment for Learning folks, just did everything I could. So I was more self-taught than anything else, but at the same time, I had opportunities for a vision and seeing what leadership really looked like. I had that opportunity. And so that's kind of, was where I began into this. And then I was fortunate enough to be asked to work with the LILL program from the get-go. And so again, just that process helped me analyze to myself, well, really, what is leadership and how does leadership look? And this whole idea of spheres of influence was new to me. And so that was what came out of that. And again, just meeting people and looking at the different models of what leadership was. And so that kind of is where I'm coming to with this. And yeah, it's just, it
Yeah.
changed my life really in the
Oh, me
sense.
too. So that is how I was introduced to you
Hmm.
actually. And so
Yeah.
LILL, just for those who don't know, is the Leadership Initiative in Language Learning. I always try to make sure I get those L's in the right order.
Yeah.
Um, and it is a cohort leadership and world language, kind of experience. And so, so that actually is the first time that
Hmm.
I personally came into contact both with that idea of, leadership and what it means to be a leader, and also this idea we're going to talk about today and we're going to dig into a little bit more, and that is strengths and
Hmm.
leading through your strengths.
Hmm.
And so the first time I took a strengths based test was that first LIL back in like 2016 or 2017. And
15.
it's 15. Oh,
15.
was it that long ago? Oh
Oh,
my
yeah, I
goodness.
gotta
All right.
say. Yeah.
So there you go. So longer than I thought. And you get kind of you take a little test and you get a list of kind of your top strengths. And it's interesting because then last year I took the same test again. And it was interesting because my strengths were still all in the top 10, but they shifted
Mhm.
because I had kind of shifted as well. But I think the big thing that let's kind of start a little bit with that. So for our strengths PD session, or whatever we want to call this tomorrow, that we're going to be doing this month, we took a quick, easy little test because the Gallup strengths based test is wonderful. I really like it. It's very in depth, but it does have a cost. And so we just kind of gave this opportunity. There's another one called High Five.
Mhm.
And it's just a quick strength based test. I took it
Mhm.
again, and Greta, you took it, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
And we're going to kind of talk about what we found and some of those kind of implications, and then kind of jump into so what. Like, so
Yes.
what? First of all, let's do the what of the strengths based test,
Yeah.
and then kind of so what does it mean. So
Mhm.
what did you find out when you kind of retook
Yeah.
that High Five test?
Well, and one thing I've noticed, because I've just like you, I've done several of these, and so being authentic with yourself and honest with yourself as you go through all these questions they ask you, it's kind of affirming because just like
Mm-hmm.
you, I end up kind of really close to the same page, and I'm always end up on the balanced spectrum. Like whatever the domains or the values are,
Mm-hmm.
I end up kind of with almost equal in each part, which can have good and bad, consequences, but still really, really close to the same. So my top five in order were coach, believer. Oh no, that's you. Mine were coach because we started the same way. Both of us coach, focus expert, deliverer, thinker, catalyst. Those were
Okay.
my top five. And so I had kind of in all of the domains. So I met each one of these except for the thinker, I think, with the focus expert was the same domain. So what about you? What did you have? I almost read
Yeah,
yours.
so I am not that balanced. And if anybody that knows me knows that that is probably true. So I got coach,
Mm-hmm.
which I think, a lot of us in teaching and education are going to probably do that. Like, really, we're looking at the potential of others, right?
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
brainstormer. So
Uh,
bringing those ideas, big picture strategist. So
yeah.
again, those big picture ideas, problem solver. So uncovering those flaws and trying to find solutions, believer, and then coach. So those are kind of mine. And I think it's so interesting because as I think about it, yeah, I'm like, yeah, that is
Mm-hmm.
totally me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think part of the whole strengths based journey is for me just looking at myself
Yeah.
and looking at those things that I kind of identified unknowingly as my strengths, and then what do you do with them, and how does that affect your leadership, your collaborative relationships with your teammates, or your other teachers, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
What do your strengths tell you about you and how you work? You said very balanced. Do you think
Yeah.
that's kind of
I feel that that's true, and I as I took this latest test, I paid much more attention to actually what the they were asking for, and I'm trying to figure out how are they honing in on it. And I have to confess that it bothered me that the questions themselves they had things like, what makes you the most excited? Or you get the most excited. You get a jolt of energy. You're thrilled with. And I got uncomfortable because, my mind would go, that is a really like thrilled with. Like, does anybody make 100%? I mean, I'm that
It's
kind of a
very
person.
analytical and thinker of you,
Yes.
right?
And I kept parsing out that. And the things I was least uncomfortable with is when they asked, you are naturally, I am naturally, because to me that sounded much more, but yeah, so I already knew, and I even knew more so by taking this test, that I'm not comfortable with like huge emotion,
Right.
and
That wasn't a big surprise though. We just
no, it
confirmed that,
wasn't.
right?
It wasn't, because there's none of my, like yours are like you're a believer,
Yeah.
and you're, the brainstormer and all these, and even the idea of this like vision casting, or
Oh,
I'm a creative outside because I would go outside the box. What does that even mean? Once you do
like
it,
where?
it's not outside the box anymore, right? So the analytical part of me became very uncomfortable with that. But
That's
at the
so
same
funny.
time, I look at my things, of course, the coach, because we see things in people.
Yeah.
And we also, I think part of that, and we talked a little bit earlier, is because you're a coach, you see down the road a little bit farther. And I know as a district person, when I could see things right happening, and so I would talk to a teacher or someone about that, and they were just holding firm to where they were. And my frustration would be, I'm not communicating with you that I'm seeing certain things that may have a consequence if something, oh no, I'm good, that kind of stuff. And I did not have the personality to work through that within the time frame I had. So what this tells me, and I've had to actually implement this myself, and I didn't really realize it, but I work best when I work with a person then like you, Michelle, because I am focused on getting done what we need to get done. Now, not perfectly, right? And not whatever, but we have to start the journey, right?
Yeah.
And so when I really began this big shift in my previous district, unbeknownst to me, I just somehow instinctively knew, which is also part of my strengths, is the whole instinctive part. I needed someone with me. And so the first summer I did like this 6-week curriculum writing initiative with different groups of people. And at one time I had 40 people there as we're working through philosophically what to do. And I had hired, lucky me, a colleague from a neighboring district who, if you've done strength finders, she was a woo. She was just a
You and I'm
woo.
not a woo.
I'm not a
Definitely.
woo. I'm not at all. I mean, so
We need our
so
woos though,
there was a
right?
lot of things, a lot of times, and when we did our curriculum process, we started with what I called morning prayers, which mean we set our goal for the day, and then we always had, or every other day once we got started, we finished at 4:30, so about 3:30 we have what I called show and tell. And so every morning at morning prayers, we would identify if we were having show and tell, which meant the whole group then would view what one group had done and give constructive feedback or ask questions. Really, it was all about asking questions back in that time. And so I would set that, and so I would kind of set the process for the day, and then I would stop, okay, so are we all good? Any questions? And then my colleague would go, I think what Greta meant to say was blah, 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 in a very nice, and everybody would like calm down, because their shoulders would rise. It's like, what, you mean we're not going to write all the assessments for the semester in one day? And it's like, no, and their shoulders would all just kind of go
so
down.
Funny.
And so that proved to be very valuable. And so I, and we all learn. And one thing I think we talked about too is that when I changed from my role as a district supervisor, and I'm sure when I changed from my role as just a colleague in the German PLT, professional learning team, I still had the same top 10, right? I probably still because this is part of what I call, our characteristics and our competencies. So you have certain competencies already. you trend toward being organized, or you
Mm-hmm.
trend toward being these things. And so when I moved into a different role, then it was almost like, genes are activated on a chromosome. So these other um, competencies or characteristics or dispositions would rise to the top. And one of the things I noticed that did change when I left the district and became a consultant
Mm-hmm.
was, activator in Strength Finders was like my second one, activator.
Yeah.
Because, that's what you're there to do. You are managing a
Yeah.
process, right? Or facilitating a process. And it's like, who's going to create this team? Who's going to put this team together? What strengths do we need from the
Mm-hmm.
team members? And so when I stopped working directly over time, then that activator is still there, but it was down lower. And so then I think this idea of being a focus expert, getting
Yeah.
groups to focus on here's the essentials of this task, or here's the essentials of your next step. What do you need to do to move forward? So I think that's a really interesting thing, and also a thing to be aware of, because as we change roles, moving from teacher to department chair, or moving from department chair to an administrator leadership position, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to build, I think, continue to build or just shift around our strengths. And we may have to rely on one less and rely on one more. I don't know if you have
Yeah.
had noticed that in yourself.
Absolutely. I think, it's funny that you say that, because so that first test that I took for Strength Finders way back, my top one was learner,
Mm-hmm.
and input was up there.
Uh-huh.
So I was taking in
Uh-huh.
all of this stuff. I had to learn. I wasn't acting on
Yeah.
anything yet. So I was taking all that in.
Mm-hmm.
And then those kind of disappeared out of my top 5 in the next 5 years, as I kind of tapped and really dug into those strengths of learner and
Mm-hmm.
of input, getting that input. And then it switched to strategic and ideation and
Mm-hmm.
activator. So then it's like, once you have all this stuff, you have all these, you've
Mm-hmm.
learned, you've taken all this input in. I think then my strengths of like, okay, but what are you going to do with it? Like, how are
Yeah.
you going to strategically do something with this information? Kind
Yeah.
of then became more prominent,
Yeah.
which I think is, again, it's fascinating. I also just think, once you're aware, once you take one of these sort of tests, and there's lots of them out there, whatever you do is great. But once you're also aware that that's your strength, I
Mm-hmm.
think you tune into it more.
Yeah.
And not only do you kind of build that a little bit, but then you can also see some of the dark side, or the darker side of some of these strengths.
Mm-hmm.
My son, he loved Percy Jackson when he was
Yeah.
little, and one of the key things that they kept saying was, that his, Percy Jackson's greatest strength is also his greatest weakness. And
Mm-hmm.
I do feel that way with my strengths at times, where I have to be careful, as I will stay in brainstorming mode. I love brainstorming mode. Talk about,
That's
that is where I love to be excited, and I get energized, and I can brainstorm all day. But if I don't have a Greta or some other people that are
mm-hmm.
like on my team to ground me and then move us forward, that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be effective as far as influencing different initiative, different ideas, different things, right? So I have to be very careful with how much I lean on that strength, and how much I try and, when I bring it out. And
Mm-hmm.
if I know that that's my strength, that's great. But then I need to make sure I have somebody that can help tug me away from that big picture, strategic,
Yeah.
sort of thing. I make quick decisions because I can see the whole picture.
Yeah.
But I get super frustrated when somebody gets really slow and wants to be super detailed and dig in and do all of the stuff. So I have to know that that's not them. That's me.
Uh-huh.
That's me moving too quickly, so,
Yeah. I think that is brings in this idea of communication being so
mm-hmm.
important. I saw a quote somewhere, and I can't, credit it. I can't remember. Oh, maybe it was the coaching guy from Kansas. I can't remember. But he said the biggest danger in communication is the thought that it actually happened.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Oh,
so
that's great.
I again, so the dark side of me, I mean, I love to brainstorm too. I'm right there with you. I mean, I can think about things, we can get things going, I'd love to bounce us ideas, but there always comes a point in my mind where I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we have enough to go on. Let's go. Now let's stop doing this.
Right.
We've got enough. Let's move forward. And there have been times in the past when, because I'm a deliverer, that's my number
Yeah.
3, right? And where I have like, okay, we're going, we're gone, we're starting, and I start doing whatever it is, and everybody else would come back the next week or the next meeting,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh no, we didn't say we were going to start yet. And I'm like, what?
I
What
thought
are
we
we
did.
waiting for? I mean, what did
Right.
you not? What do we need that we didn't have? And
Right.
that's been a very awkward situation where, again, as someone who's I'm focused,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a deliverer, I feel confident, I'm a thinker, I got my stuff behind me, where I feel like, well, what am I even doing here then? And other people feel like I have just taken control. But I haven't taken control. I thought we
Right.
were all moving forward, right? So
Right.
that's that communication. And so on my part, so I recognize that I have to be very direct, which I'm not a real direct person. I
Mm-hmm.
don't like to be direct. I don't know what it is, but I'm like, do you think we're ready to start yet? That kind of stuff. But rather than saying, okay, have we
Mm-hmm.
agreed that these are the 4 things we want this workshop to
Yeah.
contain? Direct in that way, because
Right.
that also makes everybody else focus. So
Yeah.
I can't just be indirect where I thought I could be, because I would have picked up on my own cues, but they don't. Right.
No,
So
right.
I really
We
think
know ourselves, right?
yes.
Yeah,
So
no,
being
that's so great.
able, that's why you see so many people that are just independent, because it is honestly a lot easier for me just to do something myself. I still go through all the steps,
Yeah.
but it's like, because that communication is difficult. However, the power of a team, the power of a community working together is always stronger than one person.
100%.
So this kind of, leads me to this idea. Once we kind of identify our strengths, what is this idea of authentic leadership? I keep
Mm-hmm.
running into that. And again, myself, I always ask myself, does that mean there's an unauthentic leadership? And I think yes.
I think there is.
I think
Yes.
yes, which we won't go there. We're not going to go to the
Right.
basement, as strength
Yeah.
finders say. But this whole idea of authentic leadership, I think this hits at things we've been glancing off of a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
is, me putting myself in the position to where I'm going to have to lead in a way that is not my strength.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that doesn't mean I need to be non-responsive, but I don't know. We really, our strengths are it's almost innate, right? I keep coming back to this idea of dispositions I already have,
Mm-hmm.
and growing out of that. Like some of us just have an empathetic disposition, right? Some of us just have this brainstormy, 1,000 solutions for a problem, to a greater extent than others. And then the competencies. One of the things when I read the Understanding by Design book by Williams and McTighe way back when, is that they talk about these things, develop that, but they want learners. Then their context was learners have dispositions, and then we want to translate these dispositions into competencies, and that we can do that. Of course, it was all through the lens of learning, like being able to compare and contrast. All of us
Mm-hmm.
can compare and contrast, but to a greater or lesser extent, or in a more analytical or less analytical way. So
Mm-hmm.
I really feel like sometimes our strengths are these manifestations of our dispositions and competencies there,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really that helps us work the best.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're working your best, when I'm not trying to be a woo, because again, a woo is that just like it sounds like, right? It's that woo kind of person, right? And we need those. Like those are the people that build energy and excitement and
Mm-hmm.
get us on board and super excited. But if I try and be that person, it's not authentically me and it doesn't feel right to me. And I'm sure it probably does not feel right to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned before, which I really think is important, is just that I can't be all the strengths and do all of the things. That's not my job as a leader, whatever that means, right? And so I have to do me and do me well. I have to be competent in other things. I have to pull up, some woo-ness if I have to. But I also need to rely on collaborative relationships and teams and other people that bring in other strengths. And to me, that's what authentic leadership kind of really is. It's me knowing myself and me knowing, Greta, that if I do need that person to help pull me in and keep me focused, to check in with me and to ground me a little bit, or you needed somebody to help communicate, to that, what you were thinking, that we know ourselves, we know our teams, our people around us, well, and we know what brings them that, what their natural kind of dispositions and happy place is.
Yeah. And you said something earlier that also triggered a thought in me, that the fact that when you took the strength finders, first year, one of your top 3 or 5 was learner, that you're a learner. And I think that might be an answer for some of our folks who have been just kind of put in a leadership position unexpectedly or kind of thrust there, because that does happen in education. It happens the world over, right? We get put in a position unexpectedly. And so that learning piece hasn't had time to develop, or I've learned within a more narrow scope. As a teacher, I just need I needed leadership to keep my class running. Right. And so as time, the more I was in a campus, then, wow, maybe I'm on a committee, or maybe I'm sponsor of this. And so you grow these little pieces, but, and there is carryover, obviously, but if you treat if you become a coordinator or department chair and you treat your team like a class that you're trying to discipline and manage and keep in line, that's not going to go either. Right. So, that might be one thing, folks that are listening that have like, wow, especially because of COVID, all of a sudden I am the coordinator. And just like Greta, I never even was in a leadership position with a department. I was never a department chair. I was never nothing. And now everyone's left by attrition. Here I am. I want to be here. And so I always say the first thing is you need to learn first. You need to, and of course my boss, Dr. Rousseau, told me that too. But it was like, read stuff. I think we want things to happen so quickly that we're willing to listen to someone else's conversation. Not that this blog is in that format, but I just want to go and watch, edgy celebrity person present on this. And now I don't need to read, teacher's handbook. Now I don't need to read Children and Languages Making the Match. Now I don't need to read VanPatten, because I'm just going to listen to other people,
somebody else's summary of it,
who have paraphrased, or I sometimes called it pre-chewed, pre-digested for me. And I just think that that's certainly a tool, but if I really need to establish a foundation, a philosophical foundation that I'm going to use to lead an initiative or to lead a larger group of people, what is my own philosophy and what am I basing that on? So this whole idea of this circle of influence, I think that once it expands, it changes the need we have for a foundational underpinning or a guiding principle, I guess. And this is the thinker in me, which is my number 4 thing. I always feel like I need background knowledge, which we know background knowledge is the number 1 thing that brings meaning to a text or anything. So to bring meaning to my job, I need to have some background knowledge built up. And so we just need to be aware of, as our, some of us, our circles of influence have just kind of creeped open a little bit, which is nice because we never are outside of our comfort zone. But there's going to be times our circle now has inflated so quickly. We are hugely out of our comfort zone. And just part of being an authentic leader is just saying, oh my gosh, this is a little bit over my head. I haven't had this experience yet. Can I just observe? Yes, I want to be on the district differentiation team. Yes, please, because we want representation. Can I observe for the first semester? Can I observe and participate in a smaller way, and then advance my role second semester as I grow, as I learn. And I think
Yeah.
that, we're afraid that we'll lose that position on that team. But I think that means a lot because
Yeah.
just like everything else, people know you're brand new, right? People know.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is anticipating, you've just come from the head of Zeus, fully formed like Athena. That's kind of
Right.
that's what we think people expect of us.
Mm-hmm.
But being
Mm-hmm.
authentic is also to say, I'm with you. I'm catching up. And so just this
Yeah.
whole idea is no matter where our position or our role is, I think is important.
Yeah, and I think that that kind of reminds me too. Just being authentic can also mean you are vulnerable because you are saying, "I
Yeah.
don't know all of this. I'm not all of this. I need this type of person to kind of fill in these different spots." Um, I do want to talk about that idea of spheres of influence because to me, that was something
Mhm.
as a teacher in the classroom when I first started, I just gotten out of the classroom and went to my district person
Mhm.
as a district kind of person leader.
Mhm.
And I don't think I ever would have called myself a leader when I was in the classroom. I
Mhm.
don't think I would have called myself even a leader. I had a position, a leadership ish position, an administrative, I could say
Mhm.
more than anything position.
Mhm.
But that's not the same as leadership, right? And
Yeah.
so when you talked that very 2015 apparently about those spheres of influence, tell me a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is that all about? Those spheres of influence? What does that mean for those that have never maybe heard that term?
Well, and I think it goes back to our dispositions, right, and our characteristics, and we are all looking for guidance in some way or another. And I think, when you see I'll just use my experience. Here's the German team, right? The five of us. And so here we're a learning team, definitely a small sphere of influence. Nobody's
Mm-hmm.
listening to us but us, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not sharing our curriculum with anyone.
But
And
you're
so
listening to each other,
we're
right?
listening to
And you're
each other.
influencing your students.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes.
you
So
have
this is our sphere of influence. And so within this
perfect.
sphere of influence, how do I become the best team member I need to be? And I think this is almost under spoken about. And so,
Mm-hmm.
because if we're all real strong personalities, well, I think German needs to be taught like this, that, and the other, without trying to educate each other. So it's like looking at who's within this team, and who is the one that's going to keep us on track, who is the one that's going to make sure if we have a deliverable, it's going to be done, who is the
Mm-hmm.
one that's going to bring up, well, on the other hand, right, we need this
Yeah.
healthy back and forth between what we've always done versus what we
Mm-hmm.
might try that's different. So is this the person who keeps up with takes the foreign language annals, or attends
Mm-hmm.
ACTFL, or participates in AATG and gets a wider view than what we get in our little town in Texas. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are the spheres of influence I have within my strengths, within my PLC or my PLT? And I'm the one that keeps us on track and keeps us going. So my friend Lori's the one that always says, "Hey, but what about this? What about that?" She's from the
Mm-hmm.
Midwest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So her dispositions is always like, "Whoa, wait a minute," that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the person that was just the way out of the box, way craziness. Well, why do we have to do this way? And so
Mm-hmm.
this whole idea of the conversation, this sphere of influence, we're influencing each other as we are working within our strengths. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, our whole goal is to keep that active, respectful, and we're all learning from each other. So Lori's like a little bit more of this, I'm a little bit more of that, my other colleagues a little bit more of this, and we're all then trying to work together to as effectively come up with this curriculum plan for our German
Mm-hmm.
students. So
Mm-hmm.
Lori becomes department chair. So now her sphere of influence has broadened. She still works with us, but now she's broadened out. And she's going to have to do the same thing. So, who within our team is the
Mm-hmm.
communicator? Who within our team, and I think we even saw timekeeper, the one that
Mm-hmm.
keeps us on
Yeah.
track. Who's going to be now this bigger team? My principal expects an agenda. What
Mm-hmm.
should that agenda look like? Who's going to how are we going to make sure that the German teacher, the Chinese teacher, and the Latin teacher feel an equal participant with this department
Mm-hmm.
that has, multiple Spanish teachers, multiple French teachers, and these are singletons. How are we going to work that together? So her sphere of influence now has expanded, and it includes now things about what do we do about our common assessments?
Mm-hmm.
How do norming sessions work? What's going to be our, so it, as we go out. And so Lori's strengths still there, but she's going to have to activate more of them because now she's guiding a process. And
Mm-hmm.
part of that is identifying who within that circle is already there, as you said, already has
Mm-hmm.
those strengths that we're going to help this group function. And it just kind of commands. Now, does that mean Lori is not going to be involved outside of her influence? No, because that's the whole thing. You're like little drops out here. And I love that
Mm-hmm.
image. I can't remember who did the
Yeah.
ripples of our sphere of influence, but that is where we can, and gets us a little bit to advocacy, which we'll talk more about
Mm-hmm.
in just a minute. But these little drops out here. So Lori does a supremely great job of leading her contentious department, who always had, the Spanish teachers all want everything, and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. And so then she's participating then with her whole campus when the
Mm-hmm.
principal brings in all the department chairs together, and she is sprinkling out her little drops. The ripples are showing this is what we're doing. So wow, she might need to be this. And so you just expand from that or
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
That's also the thing. There's no negative feeling or attitude towards saying, I am the most comfortable. I feel like I'm really giving back. I'm giving value by leading this large team so that every student learning languages in our high school is
Mm-hmm.
going to have an equitable learning experience. We're all performance-based, proficiency focused. We're all this, we're all that. So I feel like this is really my world
Mm-hmm.
because I'm totally influencing students and making a difference in their lives, as well as growing my teachers, right?
And
And
that's okay.
that
I
is
think that,
okay.
like, I think we look on social media and we think, oh, well, everybody's got to present at ACTFL or these big leadership sort of things, right? Doing these big things when you
Mm-hmm.
can have very important influence, I'd argue probably even more influence in the direct lives of students the closer you are to that, kind of small circle. And so there's all sorts of places, and where your strengths lie at different
Yep.
points may kind of help you determine what that sphere of influence is and how you can be the best in that
Yeah.
particular place at that time.
And that is really the truth that I hope that your listeners are hearing, is that just advancing through the circles doesn't
Yeah.
mean success.
Right.
Because things happen. Just like I'm a believer in sometimes things don't come around more than one time. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a believer in, so then you need to be ready. You need to have your skill set, or at least to be open.
Mm-hmm.
But if that thing doesn't come around, or that thing comes around once and it doesn't work for you, and you don't have to move it, then that's okay, because there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing that means success to me more than our students learning to communicate in the languages that we're teaching, that
Right.
they're attuned to the culture, they're confident speakers and users of the language. And sometimes I think we've forgotten that is really it. It's not to be, you know, even though those are also places and spheres
They
of
are,
influence,
absolutely.
but sometimes we get in a place where our sphere of influence has even gotten smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that we think we want and we achieve, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I really don't now have a voice anymore.
Yeah.
And so that's, again, it's a live and learn type of a thing. Well, been there, done that. So I know where I can make the most impact. And that's part of
Yeah.
our strength. That should be part of the authentic piece of our leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and to not be afraid of that. And that's why I go back to the
Yeah.
whole idea of LILL, and, having a conversation with Marty Abbott way back when. And her vision was grassroots leadership from top to bottom, and not
Mm-hmm.
top heavy with here's our heavy hitters. And if you just do what this person
This person
says,
does, right?
"Oh, you're going to be you're going to be the best German teacher possible," but no, it's starting this way. And you know, if the roots are not there and they're not nurtured and fed, and the stems of that wheat plant are not strong enough to hold up these, you know, the fruit that you see at the top of the tree, the whole wheat stalk is going to
Yeah.
die. And so this grassroots thing, and that's the proudest thing, I think, is that her vision was a true vision, and that LILL really has, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for
100%.
LILL.
I know I wouldn't be where I, am at any point. I mean, just my own personal development
journey.
Just a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things we talked about is just, I think what LILL does, and what just this whole conversation, it doesn't have to be LILL, just this whole conversation about leadership, it really changes our perspectives about what leadership is, who it is, what it's for, what's the purpose of it, what impact do we have? And I think it just expands that. And once you start thinking about leadership in a different way, and including your own vision in that and your own team as leaders, I think you get on a path where you can't unsee it, you can't unlearn it. And then once you're there, you just kind of keep digging in, and I find it very rewarding, both personally and just professionally, to have these conversations and think about these things in a deep and meaningful way.
Well, this is why we're here, why we're doing that, because it is, and this is one thing. If they had asked me this on that survey, do you get excited about having professional conversations with colleagues? I would have to say yes.
I love that.
Do you get a jolt of energy? Yes, that one I could wholeheartedly say yes to. And I just, the whole idea of perspective is huge for us, because perspective means, to me, I can see myself in whatever it is I'm looking at. So if I'm looking at a department chair, I can see myself as that. If I'm looking at myself as the catalyst of my PLC, I can see myself there. And so sometimes it's scary. Sometimes we see ourselves too clearly there without doing the work underneath, because I do believe that in order for leaders to be authentic leaders, the work needs to be underneath there. Feet of clay always shows up sooner or later. And we want something that is long lasting. We want something that, again, not that it's got a product that's going to just, but that the people we work with will see our authenticity, and they'll begin to believe that leadership is a skill instead of just innately endowed upon us, and that I can develop my strengths. I can get experience doing certain things. I can develop my competencies in a way that's going to create it. And just the whole idea that I can bring together, which is to me what a leader does in some way, shape, or form. It has to be a leader's going to bring together folks that will collectively work together on whatever initiative needs to be done. I'd rather use initiative than product, because it's not always a physical product, but this collective leadership, particularly where a lot of folks are working now in PLCs and PLTs, because it's not still, the leader is not the one that tells everyone what to do, because there should be there should be an external, here is our goal, here's what we need to accomplish. And honestly, one of the books I read that was really tiny and pretty influential on me, I didn't think of it at the time, was this I just had the title of it, and but it's about putting together teams. The 5 dysfunctions of a team. And it's so difficult as a leader to make these decisions about this team, but that is the thing. When a leader, to me, true leadership is saying, here's a goal, here's a task I've been given. Here are the folks that are within my circle of influence. Which are the folks in this circle of influence who have the skills that we need to collectively bring together to accomplish this goal. And it may not be everyone, and that's, because we all want to be on the team, right? We all want to be part of it. And sometimes as a leader, that's the most difficult job, is saying, you are an excellent curriculum writer, Michelle. I don't even know if this is true, but I'm sure it is. But you are just not really good at writing assessments. Or Michelle, you are great at writing assessments. You are great at strategies, like how to teach in the target language. However, the curriculum, how would I say this? I would say, however, writing curriculum so that everyone in our district can understand what to do and how to implement the curriculum is not one of your strengths. Because you know what to do in your head, right, and you cannot communicate it out on paper. You can communicate it orally. Unfortunately, that is not the mode of communication that we're going to use.
That we need right now, right? In this, right.
So who has the ability to take these cool ideas and actually put them in a form that other people can read and go, okay, here's the goal, here's the plan, and then know how to implement. And so that is the hardest thing. How do we do that? Especially when sometimes principals say, or my boss,
you need this person, right?
We
Positional this person, right?
Every campus on the curriculum writing team. So again, me as leader, I've got to do a quick down and dirty strength finders, right? Unless I know.
Right. But I love that idea though, too, because I'm sitting here thinking realistically, I want to be involved in all this stuff. I want to have a voice, and I want to be that, sort of person.
I want to be on that committee.
But when it comes down to it, I really don't. I really don't want to write. That is horrifying to me, to sit down and have to write out all the details and all the 1.2 points. Right. That's not me. If I know that about myself, and that I'm best used at the beginning stages, well, all the ideas are coming out and all of the potential possibilities are kind of being put on the table. I'm happy. That's where I can have the biggest impact. I can be the best use to the team. And if I know that that's my strength, and I know that that's where, where I'm going to be best, and that it's
all good.
It's all good. Exactly. I'm not upset because I didn't get on, this team, that team, because I know this is me. Right. And I think that is such a really important thing. Nobody else has to tell me that that's not my strength. Yeah, I know that's not my strength, but did I always know that? No. Not necessarily.
So
you have to do some work.
Yeah, and it's like a perfect solution if you start thinking about it like that. Yeah. So you have to have this person on your curriculum writing team, and they're not really philosophically with it, and they're all, they have their strengths, but their strengths are real structured, accuracy, blah, blah, blah. Oh my gosh, perfect solution. This person is the editor.
Yes, 100%.
Misspellings, gender. And you just set up a thing. Number one, you can't change anything without, you've got to put the change in parentheses in red.
Yeah.
Because I am not a Spanish speaker. And so I've got to see what you're proposing for a change. Then we can bring it back to the team. You can join in. We can have philosophical conversations about the word to choose. You know what I'm saying?
All the things.
All the things. And then the team still has input. You have a role. But at the same time, wow, you're reading this wonderful proficiency focused lesson and unit. And wow, and you're going to start getting a little curious. How did this really work? Well,
I love it.
So that was the biggest discovery or aha moment I had in terms of developing curriculum, because there's other factors involved in who wants to write curriculum, and so.
But I think that important part is just even recognizing that everybody has something that they are strong at. Everybody has something to contribute. And the more we combine all of those things into one, team in whatever way, possible.
And just
getting all those perspectives.
Yeah. And the impact of leadership this would not happen unless we had a leader to help facilitate this within the sphere of influence. You've seen it happen before, where everything just falls apart because nobody agrees, everyone leaves, but it's like that is the impact of leadership at the grassroots level. Sometimes I think is even more important than the way up here in the stratosphere leadership level. My superintendent, he didn't get involved in the nuts and bolts of all decisions. He was the final one who said, yeah, good, bad, ugly, whatever. But it's like, no, it's where the magic happened was down here in things that directly impact students.
Yeah.
And teachers, because of that. So,
which really kind of leads into one of the last topics we were thinking about, and that is leadership as advocacy. Because again, doesn't that kind of touch on that, where how being a leader can be a form of advocacy in a lot of ways. So tell me a little bit about that and what you think about that.
Well, so on a campus, if I were the department chair, I would have to believe that part of my role is to advocate for my team and my content area on campus. So that means I've got to get really good at the things my principal values, right? I've got to be able to have that kind of perspective that he doesn't really know a lot, and his Spanish learning or German learning or French learning or Chinese learning experience was not good. So me trying to force things into him that he can't connect to, so I think this is a different skill set, but I think this is an advocacy that I personally am more comfortable with, advocating for my team, advocating for my department, because I have a personal connection to these people. And because if they're benefited, the students are going to be benefited. So it kind of makes me look at strategies and my strengths in a way that's going to connect to other people, what we would call the stakeholders, which to me is such an impersonal.
There needs to be a new word.
I don't know what it would be. So part of my job is to make my principal look good by making my department look good. And I remember Mimi Met telling me one time, the thing that a principal doesn't want is lots of phone calls from parents about the world language program, in terms of it's messy and, wow, my Spanish student's doing this, but my German student's doing this. And wow, no, this is easy in this course, this is hard. So I've got to bring that reality to the team. We've got to be cohesive. We've got to have common goals, but then I've got to make sure that my principal knows, right? We are working towards this. I need to have a newsletter. I need to have, on the announcements, a German day or French day, Spanish day, Chinese day, on special events. I've got to do this. And again, some department chairs I've met, that's just part of their dispositions, and it becomes innate. For me, I'm all about advocacy, but the ideas of all these little fun things to do, somebody else on the team would need to help with that. That would be that responsibility. And so then once you get at a higher level again, then my job as a district person was to make my boss look good, make my boss look proud of what we're doing in world languages. So to get the Apple test scores or the stamp test scores and promote them, to enter my kids in contests, to do all these things. And in order to do that, we've got to get all the teachers in the district together on the same page. So parents aren't sitting at the soccer game going, this is what my Spanish 3 student had for homework. And the other's like, oh, my Spanish 3 student's just filling in blanks. And the parents are like, what? Why aren't they? So that is, I've got to bring this cohesiveness so that my teachers will become looked at as professionals, right? Not that they're not, but the perception of the person up here. So I think, advocating for this building team, advocating for the district team, and then what are these initiatives that are going to expand that circle of influence? How can the world language teachers embed literacy? How can the world language teachers be this cross-cultural thing? Why can't the senior English class read some of the texts that the AP students read? Why can't we work together with do I've lost the word,
Cross-disciplinary,
multilingual literature?
Mm-hmm.
If my AP students are doing lit analysis, why aren't in English language arts class, them read that?
Yeah.
So bringing this to the forefront. And then just advocacy for ourselves. I think in terms of, and I think now to this leader who was kind of thrust into this situation unexpectedly, advocating for your own professional development, advocating for your own growth, that things are going to build experiences and expertise. And it doesn't necessarily have to be send me to a conference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's connect up with another district coordinator and say, let me go with you to walk classrooms. Let me see how things are going. Or the English arts coordinator. So I'm going to go visit Michelle's campus that's right next to us and see what's happening. Or I'm going to start this district or this area PLC where we can all talk about what does your walkthrough look like? How do you give feedback? And so advocating for our own selves, again, with the students in mind, because our profession is kind of unique where our product is our students, not just their performance in the language, but their attitude towards the culture, their attitude towards language learning. There's more to success than just hitting intermediate mid. Maybe I never get there, but I have respect for language learning, respect the culture. So this idea of advocating within a school, within a district, within our PLC, and really even for ourselves, in a way that our upper folks are going to accept in a language that they understand. So,
yeah. And I think in a way that, bringing it all back around, when we're doing that advocacy for ourselves or for our team, even bringing those strengths in, so I'm thinking like, if you are, kind of that person that is the strategic big planner person, you're seeing those cross culture, those multidisciplinary sort of experiences and options, right? If you're a very numbers person and you're, very detail oriented, you might advocate for your department through analyzing test scores, analyzing data, being that person that makes that part relevant. You might just be the relator. You might just be the woo that brings all the people together for a potluck. And all of a sudden now the world language department is just as valid as every other department.
Correct.
And because you're, whatever it might be. And so like bringing that strength in. And again, I think there's that balance between, I want to say that one thing I saw in like the Clifton Strength Finders was like, when do you can, if I have a weakness, and data is my weakness, right? I don't like details. I don't see big pictures. I couldn't edit anything to save my life because I literally don't even see the mistakes. I just gloss over it all. That's just not me, right? So the question is kind of like, when do you work on your strengths and when do you focus on, when do you work on your weaknesses and when do you stay sticking with your strengths? And one of the things I saw was, if it's detrimental to you and your career, you have to bring it up to a level that's acceptable. But do I have to love it? Do I have to want to do it? Do I have to be like the best person with numbers? No, I have to bring that up to a level that's acceptable, right? And so that's kind of, I've always looked at like with my strengths and my weaknesses or non-strengths is how can I bring this up to a competency that is adequate, but it's not going to be effective for me to like dig into this, read books about this, do this. It's not going to ever get me to where I want to be, right? And so I just think about when you're talking about advocacy, whether you're talking about, bringing teams together, some people do it through that woo factor. Some people do it through very common strategic goals. Other people do it just through their calm and calm demeanor that can kind of bring teams together.
I think that is a really great point. Because I think it's natural for us to see an issue or a problem or concern through our strengths, right? Where sometimes it's important to see it through a different lens.
A different lens.
And I totally agree. I don't, that we have, I think it is incumbent upon us, if we're in a leadership role, to not just go, oh, that's not my strength. Don't expect much from me.
Right,
okay?
exactly.
I can't do that.
Hey, you're going to do that, Greta, right? You have to take care of that for me.
Don't ask me to bring food, okay? Because
right.
don't make me, and I will say, don't let me pick the menu, right? I'll pick, Michelle, would you pick the menu for the, we're getting a sponsor. Whatever, would you pick the menu? And it's not that I can't pick the menu, but I know what I would pick. And maybe not everybody would be happy with that. So I do think bringing it up to a competency level. And I say this as someone who once was the vice president of NADSFL, who was in charge of catering and picking the menu out. And I had to say that was a learning experience. Isn't because I think everybody was okay with it. I mean, we didn't get you didn't bad hear feedback, but it really made me, I had to stand outside of myself, which I also think is a great leadership trait.
Yeah.
Never probably am I going to be involved with any kind of initiative that moves fast enough for me. Right? Because to me, it's so direct. I can't see the big picture. Why would you not want to get there as soon as
as soon as possible?
You have to stand outside yourself at times. Yeah. Because you can only go as fast as the team can go. You can't run out in front. And so that again was one of my biggest learning experiences, to be patient with the team catching up with me. But that's because of the collection of strengths I have, where again, I'm focused on an outcome. I'm focused on a deliverable. At the same time, I want to be a thinker. I want to be a coach. And so that's a good pairing, to be focused and be a deliverer, but also be a coach, because that's the thing that's my number one, thank goodness, right? Because otherwise I would be, just let me do this for you. Just let me write this curriculum for you guys and y'all just use it. Okay. Yeah. Just let me tell you what you should do with this text. And that doesn't work, right? They don't learn. So being able to stand outside yourself, diagnose, here's what we've got, here's everybody's strengths here, and this is the process that is going to just take this, and that's okay. I'm a believer in lifelong learning. Even teachers need to learn by doing, right? And so absolutely. I have to learn by doing, by being patient, and just letting everybody at their own pace, baby steps, because you again have to go slow to go fast. If you go too fast, you're just going to end up starting all over again. And I so appreciate you saying that about they're not our weaknesses. They're just not
non-strength areas. Yeah,
they're
exactly. I agree. Yeah. And I think at some point it's just not effective. And I think we live in a culture that focuses on our weaknesses and being good at everything and being perfect at everything, and looking at, like, I'm sitting here going, oh man, I wish I had Greta's strengths, right? But I don't. I have mine. And so, everybody, I also saw something that said no leader has the same strengths in the same order. Like it's like an impossibility. And so you just need to figure out, and maybe that's how we just kind of round out this conversation, really just being reflective, kind of learning, taking some of these steps to really, sometimes you can just self-reflect on, again, what are those things that get me excited? What are those things that I'm the most productive at? What are those things? And you might automatically think of what those strengths are, or just taking a quick little assessment. I've always found them to be creepily accurate, so like very accurate. Like I'm like, ooh, wow.
Am I so obvious? Yes.
And some of that, some of them I've taken are like, okay, yeah, this is your strength. That's great. But yeah, these are all the things you need to be careful about, so that you can really learn a lot. And then once you learn, then what are you going to do with it? Right. Yeah. How are you going to use that in your spheres of influence to move us forward, but move you forward just as a person, as a leader, as a teacher, and just move our profession forward, where where we want to go. Because I think we can all say we're not all where we all want to be in our profession.
Never.
So, how can, right? Yes, because you're right. Once we get it figured out, then there's going to be the next thing.
Then it's like, oh, now I understand more about this. And so let's move here. Yeah.
Let's keep moving forward, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is there anything else as we kind of wrap up this really fun conversation? I really enjoyed this, that,
of course.
that you kind of would, any parting words?
Well, I would just say we need to really view leadership as a journey, just like anything else. I'm a real big fan of just being prepared for the unexpected, which means even I'm just going to learn as much as I can about everything that's involved, because I don't know what my next challenge is going to be. And that's just me. But I think, again, finding ourselves, being true to ourselves, and that's okay. I think that's the biggest thing here. I have my strengths, you have your strengths. They're not the same, but we're going to work together. And that's almost the beautiful combination. And that, I think, is part of the whole answer of wellness, treating ourselves well, is knowing and not falling into the trap that in order for it to be done, I have got to do it myself. And, no.
Yeah, we don't have to all do it ourselves, right?
No.
And we can't. No. And we can't. So it's a not a done deal anyway. Yeah. So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Greta. This has been amazing. And I do encourage people, if you haven't checked out our Wayside, it's called Leading the Way to Proficiency. And they're really topics like this that we've done. We've done some in the fall. We're going to continue it into the next, the second half of the year. And, just focusing on leadership skills for teacher leaders and having really great conversations like this. So thank you so much, Greta. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.